literally, so the soil is dead. Then you have genetically modified food, which has a tendency to disrupt the organs of rats and mice in a very unpleasant manner, and we don't know what it's doing to humans yet, but that nobody seems to be concerned about that. At least not enough people to raise a red flag.
Yeah, and it's interesting, you sort of started this part of the conversation in referring to the Earth, whether the Earth being living as opposed to being sort of a resource, right?
Yes.
And I think really when you begin with the assumption that the Earth is not alive, that it's not sacred. There's a lot of different ways you can put it, right? I mean, so you can put a lot of different language around it. But if you start with the assumption that the Earth is simply just a resource, right? Mm-hmm. And its only value is just as a resource, then so you're sort of starting with the Earth being dead in your assumption, and then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? You do end up with dead Earth, right? Because all of the practices that arise out of that initial kind of assumption lead to actually destroying some of the living ecology of the planet.
Absolutely, and the corporations are quick to convince us that everything they're doing is above board and not harmful. So we're getting kind of brainwashed into believing and lulled into believing that everything's okay, but it's not. I would go further to say that there's a disconnect between the left and right brains, and that we're mainly living from the left side, which is the linear side that is not intuitive.
I agree with that. I mean, a couple of things you mentioned. I mean, one is that, mentioning corporations, and when we think about, if we buy into the idea, which I'm sort of proposing here, that our actions ultimately can be rooted in whatever kind of mythology we have, right? Mm-hmm. The myths we have today are largely given to us by those corporations, right? I mean, who's controlling the commercials we see on television? And how many hours do most of our children spend in front of a television? Right. It's a lot. I don't have the number in front of me, but it's a mind-boggling number of commercials, for example, that a kid sees before they turn 5 years old, right?
Oh, absolutely, and geared towards that age. So that's. That's kind of the first, the very beginning of the problem right there. Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's been figured out probably to a person how to indoctrinate the human being so that they'll socialize quickly and buy this brand and that brand. By the time they grow up, there will only be one corporation. It'll be like the cartoon where it's just Acme Corporation.
Right.
And then the choices have gone out the window, and you really are a slave, only you don't realize it.
Yeah. Well, that's an easier form of control, I suppose, than actually beating people up about it.
Right.
The other thing I want to respond to was when you mentioned the left and the right brain, and very much one of the things I do in the book, as you know, is I sort of trace kind of the history of ideas that gives rise to this kind of really profound absence of the kind of the right brain with the intuitive and the creative part. As Western industrial society has become, particularly in the Enlightenment, but it can be traced back before that. Particularly with the Enlightenment, there's been sort of a stronger and stronger bias toward the rational, right? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And everything else has been sort of repressed and pushed away. And with this increased emphasis on the rational or the logical, we've repressed the mythological or the intuitive, and as a result, we're sort of unaware that we're living in what really is a mythic world. It's a world we put together through story, and it's a world in which rational thought has its place, but we delude ourselves when we think that we are always being rational. I think Western industrial society is perhaps, and this has always been in any culture to some extent, but we're particularly good at pretending as though we make rational decisions. In other kind of cultures and in other times in human history, people were just sort of, irrational, right, and superstitious and that kind of thing. But I think in repressing that side of the brain, we've really deluded ourselves, you know, and we're increasingly unable to come up with the imaginative kinds of ways of looking at the world that we really need at this moment, you know, because a big part of that process of reclaiming our interconnection and our sense of that is really intuitive. One has to feel it. It can't just be intellectualized completely.
Absolutely. And you know, it seems to me, it seems irrational to kill other people for any reason whatsoever, and to demonize other cultures as if they're evil and wicked when they have wonderful, rich cultural, spiritual heritages to share with us. And I hate to say this, but the United States has been doing this empire building for so long now that it seems like an octopus that's out of control. And, you know, we're running into other countries and doing things subterraneously that are really quite devious and contra-intuitive. And then we're fed all these war stories. Look at Battle of L.A. just came out about aliens now. Now the aliens are the enemy. So I suppose that's going to be the next big push. But you know, all of this justification and demonization of other cultures is really wrong. My aunt came from Iran, and her family were on the higher level of the spiritual sphere, and she's a wonderful person. And you know, you've traveled throughout the country, so you know that what we're doing what we're saying and doing and demonizing other cultures is really an excuse to justify interfering in their economy for our own gain.
Absolutely. I mean, I think imperialism, much like one of the things I try to do in the book is explain how a phenomenon like imperialism and this kind of plundering of the planet that we do, and you know, sexism, racism, various other ways in which, you know, people do really kind of, as you put it, irrational things, right? Those things are at a profound level really connected to one another. These are ways of othering, whether it's the earth or other people or, you know, countries, that kind of thing. I mean, yeah, as you put it, I mean, sure, I've been to Iran myself, and you know, it's an incredibly, it's a beautiful place. It's a welcoming, generous place. I mean, people. I can recall, you know, being on a bus that broke down as I first arrived in Iran, and when we were stopped by the border security, and the guy asked me where I was from, and I said I was from America. There was a lot of surprise. It was sort of like, you know, if you ever remember, there was these commercials a long time when I was a kid called, you know, regular commercials, right? We all know the same commercials. E.F. Hutton, and like they would say the word E.F. Hutton, and everyone would stop and turn around. It was kind of that kind of a moment when I said I was from America. Everyone, they didn't speak much English, but they knew when I said I was from America, so they were surprised to see an American. But everyone was nice to me. They gave me food. They helped me, you know, helped me find a hotel. I mean, it was incredible how generous and welcoming people were. It's very different from kind of the demonization that you see in the mainstream media of that part of the world. And of course, the other thing is, if you look at kind of some of the history of Islam, for example, it's an incredibly rich and nuanced history there, from which we can certainly learn a lot. And it's sort of, you know, we get kind of a caricature of Islam in the media. That's unfortunate, right? And that's how war is always justified. I mean, how can you get someone to kill somebody they don't know, right? I mean, you have to kind of get them to buy into a story, don't you? It's amazing how powerful a story is. If you can get someone to buy into a story, you can get them to actually kill another human being they don't even know.
Yeah, absolutely. That gets back to your storytelling again. And unfortunately, it seems like the corrupt politicians and the corporations are telling the main stories that we're falling prey to. Some people feel that we're on a verge of a massive shift in consciousness or a birth, and you talk about giving birth a lot throughout the book. And what do you feel about that from your viewpoint? Do you feel like we're at a turning point, or I mean, obviously we are ecologically and in many other ways spiritually, but how do you see the shift in consciousness and what's occurring today?
Well, I look at it, and I use this metaphor that, I wrote the book as my daughter, who's now 3, as my daughter was in the womb and when she was born. So that metaphor was really kind of alive for me when I was writing the book. Yeah. So that was part of the reason why I chose it. But I think it really works. I mean, if at a kind of really basic level, it's an organic metaphor. And there's a lot of different ways we can think of ourselves and what we are, but all the metaphors we work out of. I mean, if you just sort of pick up a newspaper and look at all the metaphors that are used, most of them are mechanistic ones, right? They're based on the industrial capitalist paradigm. And it's really, really hard to critique the industrial capitalist paradigm when those are the only metaphors you have. So you need different metaphors. The way I look at the universe and the way I'm sort of proposing we can start to put together a cosmology, I'm not claiming that I by myself am putting together an entirely new worldview of cosmology, but I am suggesting that we are at a moment at which a new one is coming forth, and it will be done collaboratively, and it'll be done by all different levels of society. I think that there are points at which in the universe when something new emerges, like, and it's totally unexpected. We don't really know what it is. I mean, we have this thing called life emerges on planet Earth, and before that, as far as we know, there was nothing like it. I mean, it's entirely novel, and it emerges seemingly out of nothing. It's a total shift in the way the universe is expressing itself. It's not better, but it's entirely new. And I think in human beings there's something new, too, that emerges. And as you look at human history over the course of time, new paradigms arise in time, and a lot of time it's because of a crisis point. If we retrace, if we look at the apocalyptic, one of the things I've done a lot of is study the apocalyptic tradition, and if we look at different sort of apocalyptic traditions, they often arise in the context of crisis, and a crisis can be an ecological one, which we're experiencing now. For example, when people first ventured out beyond Africa, it was because of a drought in Africa precipitated by climate change. So that was so people are saying, let's move past Africa. And if we look at the flowering of human culture that happened after that great migration happens, it's amazing, And then we look at, but there are also paradigm shifts that are kind of just cultural, right? I mean, we have, if you look at the word apocalyptic, which comes from, which is a Greek word, which means revelation, essentially, and the apocalyptic tradition starts, at least by that name, starts in the Hellenistic period when the Israelites were feeling the imposition of Hellenistic culture. This Greek culture was sort of coming down on their culture, and they were feeling as though they were being threatened. And there was this idea that somehow, very much like a shamanistic journey, that they could break, that what was going to happen is not just a shift in the political order, but a shift in the very nature of the cosmos, that this world, this universe, was going to come to an end, and that an entirely new way of looking at the world was going to arise. And the interesting thing about that is they weren't exactly right. The universe didn't end. We could say that, they're just sort of silly, superstitious people, but actually they were more right than they even knew. Because what actually was happening at that point in history was, it wasn't just that a new universe wasn't being birthed just in a physical sense, but it was being birthed in a spiritual sense, being birthed in a cultural sense, because of the mixing of the Near Eastern culture of the Israelites and the Hellenistic culture, an entirely new way of looking at the world was brought forth. And I would suggest that this moment in human history, as we've sort of planetized ourselves, we have this kind of consciousness that we're now aware of ourselves as a planetary being. We don't actually have a cosmology or a worldview that really is able to grapple with that. We're still kind of living in an older way of being. We're certainly, at the very least, living in a Newtonian universe, which doesn't really reflect all of the insights of science over the last 50 to 100 years. So faced with ecological crisis, faced with a crisis of human rights, faced with a crisis of